Hello and welcome to Study Sessions, the revision podcast from St. George's. My name is Mr. Boff, and in today's episode, we're analysing the theme of ambition in Shakespeare's masterpiece, Macbeth. Now, this theme is absolutely central to our understanding of the play. It's at the heart of really what the play is all about. And so in this episode, we'll be examining how ambition not only drives Macbeth's actions, and indeed Lady Macbeth's actions too, but also disrupts the natural order of the world around him, Scotland and beyond, leading to a loss of human feeling, what I'm going to be referring to today in the podcast as a loss of affect. So, with all that, let's dive into the tragic power of ambition in Macbeth, exploring how it corrupts him, it disrupts the great chain of being, and ultimately leads to his tragic demise. To begin with, let's remind ourselves what ambition means in this play. So for Macbeth, ambition starts as a kind of spark, a tempting vision that he can be more than just a loyal warrior and a loyal thane. When the witches prophesy that he, quote, shall be king hereafter, he's caught between something like awe and hesitation, a sense of him being captured. The word rapt is used by Banquo twice to describe the sense in which Macbeth is held somewhere between awe and hesitation. At first, Macbeth isn't sure if he should actually pursue the throne himself, saying, quote, if chance will have me king, why, chance may crown me without my stir. There he's getting across the idea that he's intrigued, but he's also cautious. He's cautious because he's thinking, well, is this going to just happen purely by chance? If I almost sort of stand still and wait, is the crown going to fall into my lap? Or am I going to have to be more active and make this prophecy come true? This is also, though, where we see the birth of something darker, much more malevolent, much more unsettling. Macbeth's ambition, once awakened, once, as I said, sparked into life by the witch's equivocating prophecy, it really begins to override his sense of morality. The way that I like to think about this is Macbeth, unlike his dramatic foil Banquo, is fertile ground in which the witches can plant that seed of desire, that they can really exploit his vulnerability because of his tragic flaw, because of his hamartia, which is, of course, ambition. He is far more receptive to the much more skeptical and questioning Banquo. Ambition becomes something really destabilizing in the play. It becomes almost a chaotic force, ripping apart the great chain of being. Just a reminder about the great chain of being, this is the idea, almost the cosmic hierarchy, that every single person, in fact, everything that exists in creation, has their rightful place in a divinely ordered or ordered by God, a divinely ordered hierarchy. So by attempting to place himself above his king, King Duncan, and disrupt that natural line of succession, Macbeth's ambition works against the established order, and that creates chaos. That's really, I would say, one of Shakespeare's key messages. And remember, in the exam, we've got to come back to what is, in this case, the playwright's message. What is Shakespeare's message here? What does he want us to understand? It's that Macbeth's ambition is this chaotic force, this disruptive force, disrupting, throwing into chaos the established order. So killing Duncan isn't just murder, as malevolent and awful as that is. It's an act that seems to cut at, to tear at the very fabric and structure of society itself, and sets off a chain of horribly unnatural events, actually, that reflects the disorder that Macbeth has unleashed. So remember, in the wake of Duncan's death, even nature itself reacts violently, weirdly, horribly, surreally. Horses eat one another. The sky stays dark. Shakespeare uses these images of nature violently disrupted and almost turned against itself to show that Macbeth's ambition doesn't just harm people, it poisons and throws into chaos existence and reality itself too. In Act 1, Scene 7, Macbeth gives us one of the most famous reflections on ambition. Quote, I have no spur to prick the sides of my intent, but only vaulting ambition, which o'erleaps itself and falls on the other. Now, this is where ambition is really taking hold. The word vaulting here is especially powerful. It suggests that ambition, Macbeth's ambition, is something almost spring loaded, out of control, and of course, really risky. This is itself a horse riding and horse jumping metaphor. And we've got this image then, or we should have this image then, of Macbeth approaching an obstacle, a fence, and that obstacle might well be King Duncan as king. And he recognizes that he needs to quote the longer quotation, he needs to o'erleap. And yet, there's something about this o'erleaping, this ambition being depicted as a leaping, overreaching force. It's not a steady drive. Then it's something that ultimately is going to lead him to fall. Okay, and we know he's going to experience that fall metaphorically, figuratively, the tragic fall. He's going to go from brave Macbeth, okay, noble Macbeth, to the dead butcher, as he's described by Malcolm at the end of the play. So he's going to fall, and it seems here that he recognizes the inherent peril in what he's doing. He understands that his ambition is dangerous and is likely to lead him beyond what is safe, or even, if we want to put it like this, even what's sane, okay? But he chooses to act on it anyway. Lady Macbeth can't be ignored here. We'll come to Lady Macbeth again later in the episode, but Lady Macbeth is one who really fuels Macbeth's ambition to go further. She does this many times. She challenges his manhood, his sense of masculinity. She is more than prepared to emasculate her husband in order to ensure that he does what needs to be done. And she says to him at one point, art thou afeard to be the same in thine own act and valour as thou art in desire? Here she's accusing him of cowardice, knowing that these words, and they are rhetorically extremely potent, knowing that these words will inflame his ambition. It's going to push him to do what he actually dreads. So here we've got Shakespeare showing us how ambition itself can be almost contagious, not just a drive that exists within, but also something that can be encouraged and manipulated by other human beings, in this case by Lady Macbeth. So Macbeth's ambition is egged on by Lady Macbeth, but crucially, because I'm not laying all the blame at her feet, but crucially, once he's committed, he's going to take it to the absolute extreme. He's prepared to commit regicide and, murder beyond that. And he's going to be doing this increasingly as the play moves on, independent of her of her influence. So then now let's think a little bit about ambition and what we mentioned at the start, that loss of affect, the kind of emptying out of emotion and feeling. So once Macbeth has killed Duncan, ambition absolutely consumes him. It takes over his sense of self, who he is, and crucially his ability to feel anything other than this intense base drive for power. This loss of affect, I think, is one of the most haunting consequences of Macbeth's ambition. And this is really something that Shakespeare is getting us to reflect upon. Macbeth becomes increasingly numb, increasingly absent in terms of his sort of emotional receptivity. He's stripped of his humanity, unable to enjoy or even, I suppose, react to his so-called, what we might consider his victories. And this reaches a really bleak point in Act 3 when he says, I am in blood, stepped in so far that should I wade no more, returning were as tedious to go o'er. At this point, Macbeth has lost any sort of emotional reaction or response to the murders he commits. He's fully in blood. There's a sense of almost wearied resignation to his own monstrous state. And of course, don't forget there, we've got his, this is the consequence of his ambitions. He's now in this, if we look at this metaphor, we unpack it, he's wading across this river of blood. Okay, he's absolutely covered in it, and he's got to the point where he's kind of crossed over where he's headed. I mean, it's not entirely clear in the metaphor. I mean, hell is perhaps one answer to that, but he's completely covered in blood, stained with the sin, not just of the regicide, but the other murders that he arranges to be committed. So he is completely in blood, resigned to his own monstrous state, but he makes the decision to just press on rather than turn back. So there's something cold, unfeeling, but also almost wearied in this particular metaphor. The numbness, the emotional numbness, deepens at the end of the play when he learns of Lady Macbeth's death. He says, and sometimes this is delivered in quite an offhand, cold sort of way by the actor. He says coldly, "She should have died hereafter." This is the man who once upon a time earlier in the play is agonizing over killing Duncan, but he's now become so desensitized that, at least with one interpretation, his wife's death doesn't seem to register in the way that it should. And this is the final stage, I think, that Macbeth, that Shakespeare is showing us in Macbeth. The final stage of Macbeth's ambition, this driven loss of affect. He's pursued power to the point where he can no longer connect with other people or even himself. Life is a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. It's almost nihilistic, that final comment there, signifying, what does life mean? Nothing. Okay, it signifies nothing. Ambition's made him a hollow shell. Okay, he's a sort of empty husk, someone who's lost all feeling, potentially, depending on your interpretation of the quote, "She should have died hereafter." He lost all feeling even for those he once loved, his dearest partner of greatness, as he refers to her in the letter. If Macbeth, over the course of the play, experiences the loss of affect, the emotional numbness that I've just described, Lady Macbeth's trajectory is rather different. She's still a hugely ambitious character. It's extremely intense, her ambitions, but they take a markedly different toll on her. So she initially embraces cruelty in order to drive Macbeth forward. She calls on evil spirits, asking to be, quote, unsexed, so she can be filled with, quote, direst cruelty. She seems in that infamous moment to see her femininity as a barrier to her ambition. So she tries to purge herself of compassion, the kind of softness and empathy that we might stereotypically, certainly at the time, associate with women. However, after Duncan's murder, certainly after the kind of immediate aftermath of Duncan's murder, the consequences of her ambition really start to haunt her. And that obviously reaches its pinnacle or apotheosis in the sleepwalking or somnambulism scene. The damned spot she tries to wash away in the sleepwalking scene symbolizes the guilt and horror that she can't seem to shake off. There's a lovely connection there. She says, of course, "Will my hands ne'er be clean?" Remember, in the immediate aftermath of the murder, when she says, "Give me the daggers," she goes and plants the daggers as part of the plot to frame the servants as responsible for Duncan's murder. Of course, it's Macbeth who is personally responsible for doing it. She says, "My hands are of your colour, but I shame to wear a heart so white." And then seems to rather blithely, as if it's not a particularly major issue that they're facing, she seems to rather blithely dismiss the blood on her hands, and she says, "A little water will clear us of this deed." And then remember, the kind of counterpart to that is the damned spot, "Will these hands ne'er be clean?" Okay, all the perfumes of Arabia can't sweeten this little hand. She can't get away that stain and that stench of sin and evil as a result of her involvement in Duncan's regicide. But so we've got Lady Macbeth's ambition. It's like Macbeth's in the sense that it isolates her. In her final scene, she is this isolated, pathetic figure, nothing like the Lady Macbeth at the start of the play. This isolated, pathetic figure on stage, being observed, but in her own kind of private hell, nightmarish hell. And she's driven to madness. She's driven to madness rather than that loss of affect. if anything, the loss of affect, the kind of callous, cruel lack of emotion that she displays at the start, that gives way to an excessive emotion, a kind of mad, deranged outburst of emotion, of sorrow and regret, and she's riddled with guilt. She's really getting a comeuppance. I mean, this is Shakespeare wanting to show to the audience, the psychological consequences of ambition, and what happens to you. Either you end up like Macbeth, a sort of emotionless monster, or you are the psychological wreck that ultimately leads Lady Macbeth to commit suicide. She doesn't even get the dignity of an on-stage death. She actually dies, of course, off stage. So it's a death that is humiliating as well as sinful. The attitude at the time Shakespeare's writing is that suicide is a terrible mortal sin. If you commit that, you are going to hell. She's going to hell many times over. So I think what Shakespeare's doing is contrasting Macbeth and Lady Macbeth's different ends to really show audiences how ambition affects them in different ways. So we've got, in summary then, Macbeth becoming detached, cold, losing all affect, while Lady Macbeth, on the other hand, is overwhelmed emotionally by guilt and by fear. Both, crucially though, are destroyed. And this is Shakespeare showing us that unchecked ambition consumes absolutely everything in its path. But also, and it is worth making this point, that ambition doesn't just consume Macbeth and Lady Macbeth psychologically. Obviously, it leads to all sorts of other terrible things. The murder of Banquo, the attempted murder of Fleance, the murder of Macduff's family. So we get these sort of ripple effects. I think of, Macbeth's ambition as like throwing a stone into the middle of a still pond of water. The ripples spread out from that central point. And in fact, they go beyond that. And we can think of ambition as this broader, chaotic social force. Macbeth's ambition does far more than simply ruining lives. It absolutely shakes the natural world and disrupts moral order itself. It's worth invoking a little bit of background context here, because it does illuminate the text and it does illuminate our understanding of ambition. So in Shakespeare's time, there's this notion, as I mentioned earlier, of the great chain of being. And the great chain of being was thought to keep society, the entire cosmos, the entire universe stable. Okay. By killing Duncan, Macbeth breaks this order, creating that ripple effect I mentioned of chaos. And we can see evidence of this. Shakespeare shows us evidence of this in the whole series of weird, unnatural events that follow. Animals start to behave violently. The earth starts to quake and shake, and there's a darkness hanging over the land. So it's through these disturbances that Shakespeare is emphasizing that Macbeth's ambition isn't just personally destructive, but also cosmically, almost universally disruptive. His ambition brings chaos, not just to his life, but to the entire kingdom of Scotland. Shakespeare's message then: ambition, when it violates the natural order, can cause society itself to be unraveled. So let's do a final reflection, a final summing up. What is Macbeth teaching us about ambition? What is Shakespeare getting at here? What's his message? I don't think he's saying necessarily that ambition is entirely bad. Okay, I think in Shakespeare's day, ambition, generally speaking, is a word with negative associations and negative connotations. But I think what he's doing is he is warning us about the consequences, what can happen when ambition is uncontrolled. Macbeth's ambition begins as this susceptibility to being tempted by the riddling, paradoxical, equivocating speech of the witches. But as he pursues that, and as he's pushed to pursue that ambition, it consumes his identity, it consumes his humanity, it isolates him, and it throws into chaos and disrupts the world around him. This loss of feeling, or the loss of affect that results, shows us very clearly as an audience how ambition can strip a person of their soul. Okay. By the end, yes, Macbeth has achieved the outcome that he seemingly wanted, his ambition of becoming king, but he's alone, he's numb, and importantly, he's absolutely beyond redemption. So ambition in Macbeth is a rather double-edged sword. it can, on the one hand, push people to achieve great things. But in this context, when we have ambition without limit, it's a force of chaos, it's a force of destruction. And therefore, we can see Macbeth's story, Shakespeare's telling of this story of Macbeth, as a kind of warning, a cautionary tale, if you will. Ambition without balance tears down individuals, and indeed can tear down entire societies and the fabric of reality itself. Now, there's loads to talk about with ambition. This is an overview. This is giving you some ideas. Remember, ambition is so central to Macbeth. It's the kind of beating heart of the play. It's really the play's central theme. That even though this podcast episode is about ambition, many of the things that I'm discussing can be related to all sorts of other themes. So even if in your forthcoming mock exam, or if you're listening to this ahead of the actual real exam, even if ambition isn't mentioned directly, the content, the quotations, the analytical points, the observations, crucially, about Shakespeare's messages here, these are all still meaningful and pertinent. There's lots in this that are going to be in any essay, okay, regardless of the specific focus, the question focus that you're given on the day. So, as always, thank you so much for tuning into study sessions. I always appreciate people listening. I really hope this dive into Macbeth's ambition and our understanding of this crucial theme in the play has given you lots of food for thought and is really going to help you in terms of your revision and preparation for the mock and also for the real exam. Please make sure that you are following the podcast so that you get notified when new episodes are released. Remember, we're on a weekly schedule now of episodes, so always make sure you're listening to the latest episodes for analysis of the key texts, key poems, the key novels, whether it's Lord of the Flies or A Christmas Carol. We're also going to do some podcast episodes in time looking at unseen poetry too. So lots to be looking forward to. As always, best of luck with your studies. And remember, when it comes to Macbeth, we're always, no matter what the question is, all of our revision around ambition is always time well spent. So happy revising.